Hello Penguinauts, I'm the Beardy Penguin and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program Endurance. Today we're doing something a little bit different, finally taking a break from working on Artemis, as our Memento probe, launched about 2.5 years ago in game time, is finally arriving at Drissen, the new name for the distinctly boring planet Dres. So here we are at Drissen. There we are, just rotate the spacecraft around to our maneuver node and let's take some science reports. There we are. Thing is, okay, so we are actually going to be bringing all of these reports home. This is actually a sample return mission, but we might as well transmit some of the science now. You know, the repeatable experiments like the temperature scan, where it doesn't really matter, because then we can then recover the rest of it later, but we'll get an initial boost of science, and hopefully, as we see here, we've got some actual world first. Let me transmit that first. Here we are. Initiated the first flyby of Drissen, and we get quite a sizable bonus to that as well from all of our strategies. So yeah, and then we get world first from transmitting experimental data around Drissen, and it looks like that was actually a contract as well. I don't know how many contracts we actually have. We've got to send science data from the surface of Drissen, and then land probes in 3 different biomes. I believe that is actually it. Yeah. Yeah, we don't actually have a huge amount of contracts with Drissen, but that's quite alright. I mean, we filled a lot of them up with Malice contracts. The instrument reads 0. It's as if it were in a vacuum. Transmit that as well. Actually, we'll just take a little old quick save just in case. The quick saves take a long time now. The goo seems to forge itself into a weird shape and proceeds to escape the containment unit and slap you in the face. Alright, we're going to keep that one. Certainly. Oh, actually, we need to make sure we're using the correct material, well, the correct goo. Oh no, we have 2 goos on each thing. Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking because we want to have goo from the surface, but we also want to have goo from orbit. So we need to be careful about which ones we do, the non-repeatable experiments. We're only doing 1 material scan on the surface, so we're not actually doing the material study. I do want to read the message though. I think we might have a fun message. This place is still boring, yeah. Then we'll just reset the experiment. Gravity scan though. Wait, how does this thing work again? Right, and then we will transmit that data and get some of the science. Right, okay, so then what we can do is take a temperature scan. And we'll keep that experiment, take that atmospheric pressure scan, a boring old space rock that doesn't have an atmosphere. What did you expect? And take that gravity scan. Weak gravity well with no disturbances seen, right? And then, where is our experiment storage unit? It's here somewhere. I think it's buried inside the antenna. Yeah, so we've got this tiny little probe that is going to be returning. There it is! Collect all. Ha! Wonderful. Okay, so we've made one of our mystery goos inoperable, but we don't have any goos on the actual main spacecraft itself, so that's fine. We just won't use this one. We'll save this one for the surface of Drissen. So for those of you who might be slightly new to the Kerbal Space Program community, Dres is a little bit of an ongoing joke, because it's far enough away and hard enough to get to, yet also boring enough, as it's just a big dull grey rock, that nobody ever really seems to go there, which led to a bit of an ongoing meme that Dres doesn't actually exist. I've forgotten the guy who started it, but he made a sequence of videos just going on about how Dres doesn't actually exist, because you've never been to Dres, nobody you know has ever been to Dres, therefore Dres does not exist. All the Dres landings you've seen are actually just faked on the moon. And so a number of the science reports you're going to see in the episode today are linked to that in some way or another. I think it's just a wonderful little bandwagon. It confuses so many people so many times. Like, I remember Tape got in on the joke as well. When we did do Kerbol Rising, we weren't actually going to visit Dres, even though Dres was in the solar system. We both agreed never to go to it because it doesn't exist. Dres doesn't exist, guys. Wake up, you're all sheeple. It's a government conspiracy. The Dres landings, they were faked on the moon, and these landings, these probe landings, who knows, perhaps they're being faked on Nemesis. I mean, they're close enough. Nemesis has got, you know, canyons and mountains just the same, perhaps. It is all an elaborate conspiracy. So you can see here we've got ourselves into quite an eccentric orbit of Drissen. What we're going to do is try and use Fisher, which is the moon of Drissen. Of course, back in the base game, Dres didn't have any moons, but it is in the middle of the asteroid belt, as it is, I believe, actually a dwarf planet. So now it has a little accompanying moon, which I believe is made out of magic asteroids, which will be expanded upon a little later in the episode. But we're going to use that as a gravity assist to put us into a slightly lower orbit, save a little bit of fuel, and also drop off the first of our 4 probes, which is going to go land across the surface of Fisher and Drissen to get us some science. Okay, so first let's do our repeatable experiments. First of all, temperatures scan, you failed to get a result. Just transmit that. We've got this lovely big antenna, so our transmission speeds are actually pretty fast. I think Drissen's actually quite close to Solitude at this point in its orbit as well. So, yeah, there we go. We'll just keep the experiment and collect that. Wonderful. The atmospheric pressure scan. There is nothing here. What a surprise! A surprise that, yeah, is not much of a surprise. Then we'll grab that, and we will all. Gravity scan. You detect disturbances at seemingly random locations. I'll have to look into that further. Oh, it looks like we've gone over another biome now. Oh no, okay, no, we're still over the same biome. Right, then we'll keep that experiment and collect that. Right, so with the mystery goo observation, we're going to make sure we use a different probe, because each of these different probes are going to be landing in a different spot on either Fisher or Drissen. So one of them is going to land on Fisher, and one of them is going to land on Drissen. But we want to make sure we save one of these so we can actually have a goo report from the surface. So we want to use one of the probes that haven't already been used. So we'll observe the mystery goo here. The goo notices Fisher's gas plumes and tries to get closer as if it knows them intimately. Fisher has gas plumes! This is interesting. Okay, and then we'll collect that and not transmit it, as I said, because we want to get all the data back from that, and this is a non-resettable experiment. We're not doing the material study, again, as I said, because we only have one for each landing spot, and we want to have the landing ones because those will have the largest amount of science. I do notice that we don't have a magnetometer or a gamma ray spectrometer on this spacecraft. I'm not sure if we launched this at a time before we had access to those, or if I just forgot when I launched it, but we launched this so long ago that I honestly have no idea. But if we did forget the magnetometer, it's not the end of the world. So we get a bit of money from our world firsts, and of course from our strategies as well. Right, let's do a material study just to get the message, just to see if there's a fun message. The material samples seem to be activated by some mysterious emission, causing these samples to glow green. Ooh, very mysterious. We shall have to investigate that further. So after getting gravity scans from a few more different biomes, we're going to deploy the first of our 4 probes. And these probes are quite interesting because they're actually 2-stage, and the reason why we did that is because all the heavy science equipment, so the materials bay and a surface sample collection drill, which is pretty special, are all on the bottom stage with its own set of engines and fuel supply. So that's going to be the descent stage and take us all the way down to the surface of Fisher, and then 3 different biomes on Drissen, and then we're going to get all our scientific data from the surface, so our surface samples and our material study and etc. And then instead of transmitting it back, we're going to put it into the storage unit on the top of the probe, and then that is going to decouple with its own tiny little engine and head back to the main spacecraft. And then once we've got our surface samples and our scientific data from all the different biomes that we're landing in today back on the main spacecraft is then going to take a high energy trajectory back to Solitude, and then pretty much all of it's going to burn up apart from a single experiment storage container and a heat shield and a couple of parachutes, which will then take all of our reports back to Solitude to be recovered for the maximum science yield. Okay, so the spacecraft is quite imbalanced now, so we need to run the engine at a bit of a lower setting. I think that's about as high as we can go. Yeah, that's about as much as the reaction wheels can cope with, so actually the burn's going to take a little longer than expected, but in the meantime we can do all our different Science experiments. Archangel is warming the surface to a cozy temperature. Very fascinating. And then we'll just grab that again. How does this even give science? We already did this around other celestial bodies. Why would you even repeat the same experiment? I mean, it's fair enough. We're just measuring the temperature of space repeatedly. Atmospheric pressure scan. As the cameras beam back images of the surfaces, you get flashbacks to the unfortunate fate of Progress 2, which ironically didn't make much progress. Is that the one that crashed into the surface of Nemesis? Some of these science reports were written a long time ago. Yeah, I think that is the one that actually crashed into the surface of Nemesis. And, oh, look, still nothing. Yep, we haven't got an atmosphere. Still in a vacuum. What a surprise. Right, we will do our mystery go observation, but we'll select which one we use carefully. Gravity scan. The readings are abnormal, and that it literally just says abnormal. To be fair, Drissen does look a lot like Nemesis, or the moon. Although it looks a little bit more interesting than Dres did, I'll give it that. But, yeah, still not a huge step up, not going to lie. I think the massive canyon is still there, though, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Sick. Okay, right. So we just finished the burn. Awesome. I almost didn't see that, but yeah. Okay, the main massive, great big Dres canyon is sort of still there. So I'd very much like to go land in that at some point. We continue doing gravity scans. It's pretty much the same message. Okay, we only got one message for that. Let's do the mystery goo observation once we've done this gravity scan here. Wonderful. There we go. And we will collect all of those. Right, where's a mystery goo we haven't used? I think there's only one left. Okay, yeah, here we go. Perfect. Observe mystery goo. The goo starts to separate into its solvent and its main green gel out of boredom. And we will just keep that experiment. Very, very nice. And then collect that. Okay, let's do a material study. Just have a look at the message, but then we will reset it. The radiation has driven the samples crazy. For God's sake. Some of these reports. Now they're darting endlessly around the small enclosure of the bay. And we'll just reset that, and then we'll head on back over to our probe to land on Fisher. Now, Fisher's got pretty low gravity. It's comparable to Minmus, and that actually presents a couple of problems because Memento is in quite a low orbit around Drissen, and that gives us a pretty small window in which we're actually within signal range of Memento. Of course, we're using Memento as a relay to bounce our signal back to Solitude, as this only has a tiny little antenna on it. But that means that we need to get down to the surface relatively quickly, and the low gravity isn't going to help with that. So what we're doing here is I'm trying to maintain as much of our orbital velocity as we can, and then we're going to try and burn as close to the ground as we can to make sure that we don't head out of signal range. You can see there I actually had to adjust our orbit back a little bit, because we need to make sure that we're landing in a spot where we can still get signal, because yeah, Fisher is tidally locked to Drissen, so if he landed too far to the west here, then the surface of Fisher, or any of the surface features, might actually occlude our line of sight to Memento, and then we wouldn't get any signal, and we wouldn't even be able to land, because we would just smash into the surface, running out of signal at the last second. So you can see here we're just making our descent, trying to burn our engines later as we can, but efficiency isn't too much of a problem because we've got the entirety of this descent stage to use. But we had to change the choice of landing sites. You can see here we've got a bit of a mountain, well, not a mountain, but like a mound here, a large hill. And if we landed on the opposite side of that, then we wouldn't be able to get signal anymore. We'd lose line of sight with Memento. So we needed to go round to the other side so we can still just about see Drissen there. And there we are. We've landed on Fisher with about 30 seconds of signal to spare. So we just grab all our experiments quickly while we still have signal, and then read through them once we've collected them. So what I'm doing is just grabbing all the reports before Memento goes out of range and just collecting them, and then we can read through them a little later. But the coolest thing that we can do here is take a surface sample. Yes, we mounted a drill onto this spacecraft, so we can deploy that and actually collect a surface sample from Fisher, which I think is pretty freaking awesome. Check that out. Oh yeah, we've got a surface sample without actually having to send a Kerbal here. So the only thing we've actually lost is the EVA report and the crew report, which is very, very nice. So let's collect all of those, and let's actually have a little read through the stored data just as Memento goes out of range. We really did cut that landing a little bit fine, but let's review that data. So Because we just run out of probe control. So another couple of minutes, and yeah, we would have smashed into the surface. We got that a little too fine for my liking, but not too big of a problem. The ground is quite warm from Magi volcanic activity. Right, so this sort of comes from the sort of lore behind Fissure. So if you guys remember, the asteroid belt is filled with magic asteroids covered in a strange green sort of substance. I believe the lore behind Fissure is that it's formed out of a lot of the remnants of those magic asteroids, which form in the asteroid belt and around original Dres, now called Drissen, of course. So it has a lot of curious properties, which is why we've been getting some strange readings. So that's why we've been detecting, as you see on the way down, gravity scan, you detect disturbances at seemingly random locations. While we were in space near Fissure, the goo turned into a solid. This is a fun one. Atmospheric pressure scan in space near Fissure. You detect a faint spike, perhaps Fissure farted. Although apparently there are lots of geysers and sort of gas plumes created by the remnants of those magic asteroids, though we can't see them. Apparently they're there. Perhaps they're too faint for us to see visually, but we can detect them with our instruments. And then you can see gravity scan just above the Delta Fissure. Disturbances growing stronger. Temperature scan while in space near Fissure. Occasionally the thermometer measures a very high number when it passes through a magic gas plume. So yeah, as you see, there we go. Explained many of the strange readings we've been getting. The glow from the samples intensifies when jets of gas from the remnants of magic asteroids are released from Fissure. So that's our material study that we've taken. So we are actually going to take this material study from the surface, because you see we get the most science from the surface. We get about 120 science. So we're not going to transmit that. That's going to be going into this experiment storage unit, and then this little upper stage here is going to be flying on back. Mystery goo observation. The goo attempts to escape and head to the nearest gas plume. Its cunning plan is foiled by the fact that it has no hands and cannot open the doors. There seems to be a lot of hints here that the goo is actually made of the same stuff as those magic boulder gas plumes. So although they're magic asteroids now, the magic boulder is that Easter egg around Ike. I don't know if that's still there though. Of course we're in a different planet pack, so it won't be there in this playthrough. You detect small tremors, likely caused by Fissure engulfing the last remnants of the hypothetical Drizzeroid belt. As Fissure formed, magic asteroids released special trace gases, which still occasionally leak from the surface. That's our atmospheric pressure scan. And then gravity scan, it seems the magic asteroids are causing disturbances throughout the gravity well. So those disturbances we counted on the way down have now been explained. So we're just going to get out our chem cam, which is intended for rovers, but we just stuck it on the side of a lander because, hey, it gives us a bunch more science, shooting a laser into the rock and analysing the gas that's produced. Little aside here, I just turned on the biome map just to see what, whether we can get into an equatorial orbit and still fly over all the biomes, because we haven't got all of the biome specific gravity reports. And I discovered this! Looks like GamesLink's put a little Easter egg into the biome map of Fissure, and it says, "Hello there, General Kenobi." Just wanted to point that out before we head back up into orbit. I thought that was quite funny. And yes, I am admitting to using the cheat menu just to view the biomes for a second. I know, how scandalous. Everyone does it, it's fine. So now we've got all the scientific data that we need, we're going to head back on up into orbit. Now the reason we're using the descent stage to get back up is because we didn't actually get all of the biome specific gravity scans, hence why I opened the biome map just to see how many of them we'd go over. And the scientific equipment is actually on the descent stage because I thought, well, we'd do all our scientific experiments before we descend, which is probably what I should have done, and then we just ditch it and all of the heavy equipment and the heavy drill and materials bay and everything, and just head back with the storage unit. But it turns out that we've got a bit of fuel left, so we can just about get into orbit with that. So now we've finished with Fissure, we're going to leave that probe in orbit for a little while until we you know, decide what orbit we're finally going to put Memento into. You can see we're putting it into a slightly higher orbit there because all these smaller probes are relying on Memento to relay the signal, and so if it's in too low an orbit, it's going to continue travelling around and then go out of line of sight, and then these probes are going to hastily become impactors, and you know, we don't have any seismic equipment on the surface. That wouldn't be particularly useful, so we just stuck into a slightly higher orbit so it'll stay up in the sky for longer, so we can make sure we have uninterrupted signal all the way down. So this is our first probe actually landing on Drissen itself. This one's just going to land, I believe this is in the lower lookouts, and the next one's going to land in the Midlands, and then we're going to have a little expedition to one of those massive canyons that looked rather impressive from orbit. And there we are, touching down nice and gently and having a look at the nice barren environment around us. So now we've landed, we should get ourselves a lovely world first. Glorious. Entered into suborbital spaceflight and landing on the surface of Drissen. Right, let's grab ourselves some reports. Temperature scan, collected and recorded temperature data from the environment. Surely we have a slightly more exciting one than that. I think we can transmit this as well to get ourselves a world first, hopefully, just from transmitting data. I'm hoping if we do that again, we'll actually get a message. No, okay, it turns out we don't actually have a temperature scan for the surface of Drissen. Interesting. Right, let's do that atmospheric pressure scan next, as the autosave has finished doing its business, although we do get, there we go, science data from the surface of Drissen. We get a contract completed for that. There is no atmosphere here. Surprise! There we go, we'll keep that. I think we do actually have enough electric charge to transmit that piece of data, actually. So if we can transmit it, then we will transmit it. And then we'll just grab it again and then keep the experiment. As I said, we get a little bit of science now, and then a bit more science later, so we'll keep that experiment there. But some of the larger experiments and the non-repeatable ones, we obviously can't do that with. The goo questions why you landed on Drissen. I mean, personally, it looks exactly like Nemesis, so perhaps, much like Dres doesn't exist, and you know, all those landings were faked on the moon, perhaps this probe landing has indeed been of immense conspiracy and has actually been a Nemesis landing instead. Seismic scan. The seismic activity seems to have ended many millennia ago. I think we can get away with transmitting that one. We have just enough electric charge. Maybe we don't. Oh no, I don't think we do. No, the larger experiments, we just don't have enough batteries on board these little probes in order to actually be able to do it. That's fine though. Yeah, okay, we'll just transmit the smaller experiments. So there we go, we'll keep that experiment. Right, gravity scan, yeah, we definitely can't transmit this one. The instrument reads 0G. It's almost as if this planet didn't exist. Mission Control says it's probably a malfunction. Government-controlled sheeple, wake up! Oh, I just love all the Dres doesn't exist related science reports. Materials study. Apparently throwing surface samples into the solutions you prepared was not a very bright idea. Good thing there is no oxygen here. Keep that. And then we can extend our surface sample collection drill and take ourselves a wonderful little surface sample. There we are. And surface sample. It's not your aunt's jelly after all, otherwise the craft would have sunk into the surface. Suspicion about your aunt's jelly being made out of similarly dull rock still does not abandon you, however. Interesting. And then finally we can analyse the composition of the dust. It's not actually an atmosphere that we're measuring here. The atmosphere is absolutely trace, it's basically a vacuum, but we still get a bunch of science from this scientific instrument, so we'll certainly be taking that. Once again, extending the chem-cam to shoot some lasers into the surface, so this time we have a nice little look round, send some pretty pictures back home, although I mean they're not particularly pretty as pictures from space go, but I mean we all marvelled over pictures from Rosetta and from the JAXA probe, and that was literally just a chunk of space rock, so you know, if people can get excited about that, I'm pretty sure they can get excited about pictures from the surface of a slightly larger piece of space rock. So you can see there we've launched the upper ascent stage of the probe because we've got all the scientific data that we want. We've got our surface samples and everything, so we stuck them all into that experiment storage unit, and now we just need to head on back to Memento. And this little probe itself, the little probe that could, is actually going to end up smashing back into the surface, which does make it a little bit
Unfortunately, I forgot to bring along a bunch of accelerometers to actually get science from that. You can see there we very narrowly missed a mountain because I had a bit of a shallow ascent profile, so we just needed to raise our apparatus a little bit to make sure we didn't become an impactor probe a little too early. We want to get that scientific data to Memento before we do that. It's mainly because we've got an experimental storage unit on Memento, and these things are just going to be dead weight, which again, it is irritating that I omitted an accelerometer, because that sensor suite that we're using that has all of the different experiments in it, although it does have a seismic scan, it can't actually do the function where it starts recording seismic data. You need the actual specific standalone part for that, and I forgot about it. Yeah, this mission, I think I was so excited about the concept of doing a sample return and everything and the cool new surface sample collection drill, I forgot a lot of the basic science, so hence why I think we forgot the magnetometer and the gamma ray spectrometer. I spent all my time on the descent probes and didn't really think too much about the main spacecraft or how we could have maximized our science from here. But I mean, really, we don't need the science that much. This expedition isn't going to really give us that much science or really that much money, to be fair. We're getting more than enough money from Artemis and its mining operations on Nemesis, and we're getting far more science from our research labs, and we're probably going to complete the tech tree with our mission to Reaper. It's basically just for completion, because this is actually the last celestial body that we have yet to visit. See there, we had a little bit of a tumble and land on our side, but we managed to jump back into the air and land upright.
Alright, we've landed in Drissen's Grey Midlands. Take ourselves some science reports. So once again, we don't have any temperature scan reports, unfortunately, but once again, as I said, we can actually transmit that first, get a little bit of science. I don't know if we get money from transmitting from a new biome. We should, but the strategies with regard to that seem to be a little bit on the glitchy side, so it looks like we're not actually going to get any money. Unfortunately, no atmosphere here. Surprise! And there we go, we'll just transmit that one as well, the atmospheric pressure scan. Let's see if we can reveal a little bit more about the about the surface of Drissen. This seems like a bit of a waste of time. How can a planet with no atmosphere have atmospheric pressure? Well, you know, I guess we can monitor, as I said, the sort of dust, the sort of trace atmospheric elements that might be hanging around. I mean, technically, the moon has an atmosphere. It's just like half a meter high and basically vacuum, but you know, it is still technically there. Right, we'll just get our mystery goo. As soon as you open the container, the goo happily proceeds to jump out of it and take a stroll along the craft. Alright. Goo having a mind of its own. Seismic activity seems to have ended many millennia ago. Gravity scan. Weak gravity field detected. Composition estimated to be mostly rock and conspiracy theories. We'll grab that one. And then we will do the materials study. There we go. The material samples almost seem bored. You and I both. Look at this grey wasteland. There are little sort of flecks of colour around. It is slightly more interesting than original Dres. I want to land in one of these canyons next, not just for the biome, but also just because I think it might be quite interesting. And also a little bit of a challenge to land on. So, yeah, that's where I want to go next. And, you know, it's sort of given that you have to explore the Dres Canyon when you get here, so although it's now Drissen, the Dres Canyon is still technically there. It survived rather well, apart from a few more colours from, you know, 4 billion years more asteroid impacts and the like, sort of spreading new mineral deposits across the surface. Dres is largely unchanged, because of course it doesn't have an atmosphere or anything to really be all that affected by Archangel, and Archangel is just far enough away that it hasn't really scorched the surface yet. Toggle mining interface. Oh, hello. Okay, right, we don't want to do that. Extract surface sample. We got the same message about our aunt's jelly. Okay. And right, let's transfer that up to there, and then we'll also grab ourselves the chem cam. Okay, so the drill is also a non-repeatable experiment. So we can only take one surface sample. That is fine. Log atmospheric data, recorded measurements of atmospheric composition. We'll collect that. There we go. Okay, cool. So now we just need to do our chem cam. Wonderful. Let's have a little look around as well. There we go. Oh, look at that. Wow. Check it out. It's a dull grey rock. We'll fire the laser at the surface. And there we go, we've got that experiment as well.
So once again, we've finished all our research, and with a little hop, skip and a jump, we send our ascent stage back on up into orbit. So in this one, I've cut out a lot of the rendezvousing. I mean, you've seen all this a million times. Since Drizzen's gravity is very low, it's really quite cheap to do orbital maneuvering, so I do some pretty hefty plane changes and all sorts of things throughout this episode, and it doesn't really matter. And our main spacecraft, for all of me being quite frugal and using a gravity assist to get us into orbit and everything, it has a lot of delta V, especially once all these probes are gone. It's pretty much a quarter full of liquid fuel with just 2 nuclear engines. So yeah, we have something like 3 times the amount of delta V we actually need to do our high energy trajectory. And the only reason I'm doing it isn't just to get back quicker. It's mainly just because we missed the transfer window from Drissen back to Solitude. So I don't really fancy waiting 3 years for the next window. Since we only missed the last window by about half a year or so, about 300 days, as long as we just accelerate a bit more and spend about 500 meters per second of extra delta V, we can still get back home in just over a year, which is certainly going to be welcome. But this will be returning home in the next series, although I do find it rather poetic that in the penultimate episode of this series, as it is ending in the next episode, as I'm sure many of you know, although it will be continuing in another series. It's not the end of our adventures in this so far, we've still got another solar system to explore. But yeah, since this is sort of bringing an end to our exploration of the Kerbal system, the next series is going to be focused on going to the Valentine system, exploring and colonising that. So yeah, as I say, it's kind of poetic that we're finishing with arriving at the last planet. We've landed probes on every other body in the entire Archangel/Kerbal system, apart from this one up to now. So now it is fully explored. Not fully explored by Kerbals, but with the Reaper mission coming up, and then hopefully eventually getting some pretty powerful fusion and warp drives, we might explore these planets later on with Kerbals as well.
So here we have it, our final landing spot here in Drizzen's deep crevasses. I did say we'd land in one of these, and yeah, they don't disappoint. It looks like the Dres Canyon has had a little bit of a facelift. It's got some certainly some different mineral deposits, not just entirely grey anymore. It's actually looks pretty interesting. See all the different layers of sediment. So yeah, you've got sort of like a burgundy sort of colour mineral, and then it transitions to this sort of browner mineral as you get further down into the planet's crust. So, it looks like, yes, we've completed Drissen probe, successfully performed an automated exploration of Drissen. So our contract and that strategy are now complete. So we get the rewards from that, although most of the rewards come from increasing the amount you get from milestone rewards from Fisher and from Drissen, which is why we did the Fisher landing first, because we wanted to still get the increased milestone rewards before we completed this contract by landing in all 3 biomes here on Drissen. So let's get our last bunch of scientific reports. And now our final little probe is lifting back up into orbit. A little bit of a somber occasion really, because it's the last time in a while we're going to be exploring the surface of an entirely new world. Because although I am progressing relatively quickly through the tech tree, we're still a very, very long way away from that elusive warp drive. And although, yeah, okay, in the next episode we're going to be sending a plasma-powered probe to that solar system, it's only going to be a flyby. A lot of people have been asking sort of the logistics of that interstellar mission, and since you've seen this ascent before, I'm just going to explain what is actually going to happen when we launch the Endurance next episode. So we're first of all going to do a bunch of housekeeping. We've got a bunch of old spacecraft and space stations and all sorts lying around Solitude, and we're probably going to need to build an orbital space dock in the next series, so I want to clear things up a bit. So we'll be deorbiting some huge chunks of equipment that we've been using, which will be a little bit somber, and I'll probably do a little bit of a montage through all the different flags and probes and stuff that we've landed across this playthrough. If you guys would like that, then let me know. I think it'd be quite nice. I'll put on some sort of hopeful, somber music. That could be pretty interesting, and I don't know, kind of poetic. It'd be nice. But yeah, once we've done that, we're going to build a bunch more of those huge solar arrays around Nemesis. We need about 10 of them minimum, so we need to build another 7, which I'm sure will take quite a while and will make me partially lose the will to live. But nah, I mean, we managed to streamline their production pretty well, so it shouldn't be too much of a pain.
And yeah, but they don't need to be in a particularly specific orbit either. They just need to be around that orbit, which I have actually carefully selected. It's sort of at 90 degrees, sort of perpendicular to Valentine in the sky. So when we've got a probe heading off towards Valentine, all of those spacecraft in polar orbit will all be able to send power to the Endurance. So, you know, I'm not completely insane. There is a method to my madness. Constructing giant solar arrays. A few of you have also asked, am I going to build like receivers and like relays? The answer is no to that, because every time you relay something, you lose a huge amount of power, because, you know, it's only about 35% efficient receiving, and then you lose a bunch on transmitting it again and then receiving it again, and yeah, it's just not worth it. And instead of launching another receiver, which, well, a relay, which would require a similar amount of parts, I might as well just build another Bifrost array. And with the orbit they're going to be in and the way we're going to launch the Endurance, it doesn't matter anyway. They're all going to be able to transmit power to the Endurance. And yeah, as I said, it's going to be a flyby mission. I've got a mod which adds these huge antennas, so we'll be able to communicate with it until just after it's completed its flyby of the star. And it's just going to fly through the system and take pictures of the planets. That's the only reason we're sending this probe, is to get an idea of what kind of planets are there, because, you know, if it just has a couple of gas giants, there's no reason going there. We'll have to find another star candidate. You see here we're getting rid of our small probes. A little bit of a sad moment, but they've done their purpose. They've served us well, and now they must meet their end. But yeah, so it's going to be a flyby. We're just going to accelerate to something like 300 kilometers a second. It should get out there in about 10 years, and it'll fly by, send us some images and some planets. If we've got an interesting planetary candidate, and hopefully we'll, you know, have a warp drive by then yeah, we'll head on out there. But there's no point committing ourselves to building a giant warp colony ship if we get out there and there's nothing, which was a massive plot point in The Expanse, actually. Of course, they weren't building a warp ship, they were building the Nauvoo, which was powered by Epstein drives. And a huge thing, it was played up more in the books, actually, that they're taking this 100-year journey out there, and they didn't even know whether or not there was a planet when they got out there. It was the most likely candidate, but they didn't, you know, it's too far away, because they were going to Tau Ceti, I believe, the Nauvoo, not Alpha Centauri. So yeah, it's all a big gamble, but, you know, you want to save Kerbalkind, then it's a necessary gamble. It's all about faith, as they said. Although, you know, that their sun wasn't blowing up in The Expanse, so it wasn't quite as big of a pressing issue. Anyway, there we are. We have departed Drissen. We get a nice shot of it just leaving the system and heading on back to Solitude. In the next episode, we shall be finishing the Bifrost array, deorbiting some stuff, and concluding the series. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I've been the Beardy Penguin, and I'll see you all next time.